Have vampires lost their bite? I think it depends on what you're trying to get from whatever vampire lore you're either reading or watching. If you're looking for horror, then probably, yeah, they have lost their bite a little bit. You also have to take a look at the target demo. And when you look at the aim demographic for vampires nowadays tend to be teenage girls or very young women. So the things that filmmakers or people in the entertainment industry think that these women want, they're going to put out. And what they're going to put out isn't going to be necessarily the classic vampire. When it comes to the classic monsters, for me personally, vampires have been my least favorite. They always seem very cheap in how lazy people are with the mythology, and also cheap in if you were going to make a supernatural movie. A vampire movie is pretty easy to make. You could just go to the dollar store. You can buy like maybe some fangs for $1, some cheap makeup to put on your face, and some contact lenses. You could basically dress up as a vampire in under $20. Meanwhile, for other monsters like werewolves, zombies, Frankenstein, or the such, you actually have to put in some effort, and it can get expensive. If you were to sit down and think about when was the last time there was a vampire story that was aimed at the entire general audience and not just, say, one particular group like females or just male. If you look at it now, there's been Vampire Academy, Vampire Diaries, True Blood, Twilight. All these are aimed at women. The last one that was really aimed at men was Blade, and I can't think of a series really that's been aimed at both groups as a whole. When I think about it, my earliest memories of vampires was the movie Love at First Bite. Well, okay, maybe second. Well, maybe third. Okay, well the point is that's the first major film that I was introduced to vampires. And for years afterward, I always assumed that in order to turn into a vampire, you'd have to be bitten once every night for 3 nights in a row. Also, for a while, I used to think that in order to be a vampire, you also needed a tan. Example, Blackula, Count Chocula. That would change when I finally saw Count Duckula, but I'm getting a little bit off topic. One of the issues I have with vampires is the mythology doesn't get played around with more. Also, they seem very broken. They seem to be overpowered, and they have very few weaknesses. And if they do have weaknesses, they're never played up as much as I think they should be. When the general audience either reads about vampires or watches a movie or a television about vampires, they shouldn't want to be a vampire. Because being a vampire, well, sucks.
This isn't funny!
You shouldn't aspire to be a vampire. You shouldn't fantasize it. It should terrify you. It should scare you. And unfortunately, recent vampire pop culture history hasn't really had that. There are, however, some exceptions. There are a couple of movies that seem to be more aimed at males, such as 30 Days of Night and the reboot of Fright Night. Unfortunately, they didn't do that well at the movie theater. But what these movies did do was show how terrifying and powerful the vampire can truly be. And also, without a couple of exceptions, they also omitted the romantic version of the vampire. Well, let's take a look at how the current versions of vampires are romanticized. The pros and the cons. Pro. They're practically indestructible, which is kind of weird. super fast, super strong, immoral, sexy, beautiful. The cons. Let's see. Well, they occasionally have to drink blood. Here's one. They're always part of a love triangle. And that's basically it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand why these types of vampire stories are popular, and also why you're aiming this type of story towards women and everything, but there's no variety. This is basically all there is. I also know I understand why sex and sexuality when it comes to vampires is important. It's always been part of the lore. And to quote Jacob from Now Playing, every woman has a sexy vampire movie. There's nothing wrong with that. But have you noticed the type of vampire movies aimed at men and aimed at women are totally different? Why can't there be a happy medium? I can think of only 2 recent vampire productions where being a vampire isn't romanticized. One's Shiki, the other is The Strain. In The Strain, when you become a vampire, you lose your physical and mental identity. Well, most people do it. There's nothing really positive about being a vampire in The Strain. The only positive I can think of is immortality. Other than that, you're completely gone. Then there is Shiki, or Corpse Demon. While on the surface this seems to be a more conventional vampire tale, it does tell it a little bit differently. There's a tweak to it. One of the interesting things is, even if you get bitten, you're not necessarily going to die. And if you do die, you are not necessarily going to come back as one of the vampires. If you do come back as a vampire, unlike in things such as Angel and Buffy, your body isn't inhabited by a demon. No, you keep your personality that you had when you were alive. So if you were a passive person when you were alive, you're going to be a passive person when you come back. Shiki also shows both sides of the conflict between the humans and the vampire. At different times during the episodes, you're going to pull for the humans, and other times you're going to pull for the vampires. Because in the beginning, the humans, they keep their humanity, but as time goes on, they start becoming the monsters. And you understand why the Shiki do what they do, but you don't necessarily like it either. And I think that's what I really have a problem with these new vampire shows such. Shiki has themes, The Strain has themes, but there's really doesn't seem to be a lot of depth to these new shows and movies, and that's my real issue. And also, they're not very scary. That would be another issue I have with them. So what can be done? How about a little bit more diversity? How about aiming at different demographics, different ages? How about an R-rated Anita Blake Vampire Hunter movie or television series on paid cable? How about looking at other cultures and other countries' version of the vampire and do a spin on that? Because by doing that, by expanding it, you'll be able to include more people and more people will enjoy it and partake in it, and you'll make more money. And that's all I have, and until next time, goodbye.